My wife posted finally free from the anchor holding me back. So I quietly liked her story, left a note saying, I'm letting go, and watched her lose everything she once took for granted. My name is Ethan Ward, and I am 35. For years, I believed my marriage with Tessa was built on a foundation of small moments that carried the weight of love. Friday nights were our ritual. A skillet on the stove, the aroma of spices filling the air, and conversations that drifted from work complaints to dreams we never quite spoke out loud. It was simple, but it was ours. Yet somewhere along the line, those moments began to fade. Dinner turned into me cooking alone while she scrolled through her phone, laughing at clips I wasn't watching. When I asked, she would sigh, dismissive, and say, "You wouldn't understand." I told myself it was just a phase. New friends at work, new schedules, the kind of adjustments every couple faces. I tried to trust her. I wanted to be fair. So when she said she was meeting coworkers for drinks, I nodded and stayed home. That night, the house felt strangely larger, as if silence expanded into every corner. I folded laundry at the kitchen table, listening to the low hum of the dryer. My phone buzzed, and her name lit the screen. She had posted a story. I tapped it open and watched my world shift. Tessa, dressed sharply, stood at a bar with coworkers I barely knew. Her smile was bright, her glass raised high. The caption read, "Finally free from the anchor holding me back. Time to live again." She tagged the Harbor Lounge. The anchor. I didn't need a second to guess who she meant. My heart didn't race. It didn't shatter. It just went quiet, like a room after a door slammed. Hearts and applause filled the screen. Yes, Queen. New era unlocked. Even a woman who had once eaten at our table commented, "Told you, girl, you deserve better." I watched as these messages fell like confetti. People who once called us a cute couple were now cheering for my erasure. I didn't reply to her post. I didn't call. I didn't send a furious text. I simply hit the small heart icon. A quiet acknowledgement. Then I locked my phone. A minute later, it buzzed again. Her messages arrived in quick bursts. "Seriously, you think this is funny? Ethan, answer me." I set the phone face down and folded another shirt. When she returned after midnight, her heels clicked against the floor like an accusation. She stood in the kitchen doorway, eyes narrowed. "You're unbelievable. You didn't even ask what it meant." I met her gaze. "I don't have to ask. You said it out loud." She tossed her purse onto a chair, waving her hand. "It was a joke. Everyone knew I was kidding." My voice stayed even. "You made our marriage into content." Her eyes rolled. "You just don't get it. You never did." Maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't understand a love that needed applause to feel real. But I knew what I felt. A steady line, clearer than rage. That night I didn't argue. I walked to the guest room, closed the door, and lay on the bed staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, but peace had evaporated. By morning, my path was clear. While she slept, I packed a small bag, a few shirts, a charger, my passport from the desk drawer. On the counter, I left a simple note beside the coffee maker. "You said I was holding you back. I'm letting go. Kropka." No long speech, just truth. I locked the door behind me and drove away as the sun rose, the street still empty. The first stop was a diner an hour out. I ordered black coffee I didn't finish. My phone lay face down, but curiosity eventually won. Her story was gone, deleted, but not before screenshots spread to friends, coworkers, even neighbors. One text read, "You okay, man?" That's when it hit me. This wasn't about a single post. It was about what it meant. She hadn't come to me to say she felt trapped. She broadcast it to an audience. I wasn't a partner anymore. I was a prop. I drove to my brother's house 2 towns over. He offered a spare key without questions. That evening, sitting on his porch listening to the wind, I realized something heavy but simple. Maybe that post didn't break us. Maybe it only revealed the cracks already there. When I finally checked my phone again, her messages were waiting. "Please come home." I didn't mean it, but words shouted to the world don't disappear with regret. They echo. Days passed. Her pleas shifted from apology to panic. You're really ending this over one post? But it wasn't just a post. It was every quiet moment I tried to reach her and been ignored. Every time she looked at her screen instead of me. Every laugh shared with strangers while I stood in the background. By the end of the week, she showed up at my brother's driveway. Her voice softened under the porch light. It was a joke. I had drinks. My coworkers dared me. I looked at her steadily. You might not have meant the words, but you meant the feeling. She fell silent, and for the first time, I spoke without holding back. You don't want a husband. You want an audience. Her eyes glossed with tears, but I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. Not long after, news reached me that her post had traveled to HR at her company. They demoted her to a less public role. The same people who cheered her freedom stopped interacting with her online. Friends who once hyped her didn't invite her out. Attention is fleeting, and when the show ends, the audience scatters. Weeks later, she asked to meet one last time at a small cafe by the lake, the same place we celebrated our first anniversary. She looked smaller, quieter, with no makeup, just tired eyes. Her voice trembled. I don't know who I am without you. I listened, then answered calmly. That's the problem. You built your life on being seen, not being whole. She whispered, Do you still love me? I paused. I love who you used to be. The one who laughed with me, not at me. Her tears fell, and she reached across the table. Please, can we start over? I shook my head slowly. You can't delete what you meant. Start by finding yourself without needing an audience. I left the bills on the table and walked out. The divorce papers came weeks later. I signed quietly, closing the chapter without ceremony. I moved into a small apartment downtown. The walls were white, the windows wide, and the silence finally felt like peace. I took up painting again. I sat by lakes on weekends. I stopped living for someone else's story. One morning, a final message arrived. I'm really sorry, Ethan. I read it twice, then typed back a single line. So am I. And that was it. No revenge, no loud ending, just a man choosing peace. Sometimes letting go isn't about winning or proving them wrong. It's about finally giving yourself the freedom they couldn't offer you. In the weeks following the signing of those divorce papers, I found myself sitting in a small apartment that echoed with quiet. At first, that silence felt strange, almost like an unwelcome guest that sat too close. After years of hearing another person's footsteps, laughter, and even arguments filling my days, the absence seemed heavy. But as days turned into weeks, the quiet became something else. Not an emptiness, but a space where I could finally hear myself again. The clinking of a coffee spoon against a mug, the sound of wind pressing against the windows, even the hum of traffic outside began to feel like a gentle reminder that I was still here, still breathing, still living. I started painting again, something I had abandoned long before. When Tessa and I first met, she encouraged me to paint, saying my work brought calmness into the room. Yet somewhere along the way, my brushes had been stored in a box, collecting dust in the closet. Maybe because there was no longer room for them in a life built around her needing to be seen. Now, with the canvas before me and colors spread across the table, I rediscovered parts of myself that I had forgotten. With every stroke of the brush, I released a piece of the weight I had carried. Some nights I painted until dawn, and though I was alone, it didn't feel lonely. Felt like healing. On Sundays, I drove out to small towns I had never visited before. I sat at cafes where nobody knew my name, watching strangers go about their ordinary lives. Families ordering pancakes, couples sharing quiet conversations, children laughing over ice cream cones. These were the moments that reminded me what real life was supposed to feel like. Not performed, not shared with the world, just lived. It struck me how ordinary could be extraordinary if you were present enough to see it. That was something Tessa never understood. She needed applause to believe a moment had worth, while I was learning that worth existed in stillness. Meanwhile, news of Tessa's life drifted to me like distant echoes. I didn't search for it, but the world has a way of delivering stories you would rather not hear. A mutual friend texted me one evening to say that Tessa had been quiet online for weeks. Her followers had grown cold, no longer filling her posts with fire emojis and heart reactions. The same people who once cheered her freedom now whispered about her fall. At work, she had been shifted to a lower position, away from the public-facing roles she once flaunted. Her sparkle had dimmed, not because she couldn't shine, but because the stage she built was no longer there to hold her. I knew she was struggling when I received another message late one night. Her words were short, tired, and laced with desperation. "I don't even know who I am without you. Everyone thinks I'm a joke." I read those lines slowly, the phone resting in my palm for a long time before I put it down. There was a time when those words would have broken me, when I would have rushed to comfort her, to fix what was wrong. But that time was gone. I finally understood that some people don't want healing, they want attention, and when the attention fades, they call it loneliness. Yet, despite everything, I didn't hate her. Hate is a fire that burns both the holder and the target, and I had no desire to carry flames anymore. What I felt instead was a kind of sadness. Sadness for the woman I married who once found joy in cooking simple meals and taking evening walks with me. Sadness for the person she could have been if she didn't need validation from a screen. But sadness does not mean regret. I did not regret letting go. If anything, I regretted holding on for so long. One evening, as the sky turned gold and shadows stretched across my living room, I realized something that brought both relief and clarity. For so long, I had believed that letting go of someone meant losing something irreplaceable. But as I sat there, watching light fade into darkness, I understood that letting go wasn't about losing. It was about creating space for what was yet to come. I began to fill my days with things that brought me quiet joy. Morning runs along the river, the cold air filling my lungs. Cooking simple meals without waiting for someone to approve. Reading books I had put off for years. Little by little, I rebuilt a life that wasn't about being someone else's anchor or audience. It was just about being me. And in that simplicity, I found something Tessa could never post about: peace. Not the kind that wins applause or earns likes, but the kind that settles in your bones and makes you feel steady no matter what storm comes.